feels like a nice bounce back spot potentially for JJ this week. And, coming out after what happened a week ago with 3 interceptions for the first time in his career. Blake Corum seemed like they've been kind of getting him going. We could see a reconfigured offensive line again after what transpired in the third quarter last week when they insert Ladarius Henderson there, move Carson Barnhart over to the right side. Rutgers defense have been playing decently here early on, but, they've played a couple Power 5 teams, Northwestern, Virginia Tech. Neither of them expected to be very good at all. And Temple is supposed to be okay, and they absolutely handle them. So I thought that was, a good sign if you're Rutgers. But your guys' thoughts on this Michigan offense coming into this game?
I think that Temple game was 13-7 in the fourth quarter, wasn't it? So I think they pulled away late, and I'm not quite sure. I didn't see. I was watching it, but I want to go back and take a look at that. I don't know how much they completely handled them, but it's point taken nonetheless. To me, yeah, a lot to prove, like I said, for both teams. And I don't Rutgers doesn't have Michigan's personnel, but what they want to do is they want to shorten the game. And as we saw a couple of years ago, when they started running a little bit on Michigan had a couple of injuries on there. They shortened the game, and they made it a nail-biter there at the end. So one of the keys to the game that I wrote this week was you need to take advantage of your every opportunity you have as an offense. You can't miss an opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's a 7-6 game like late in the second quarter or something like that, because you're just not getting as many possessions anymore with the new rules. So and if you turn the ball over like JJ McCarthy did. So I have no doubt he's going to come out and play a much better game. It's going to be interesting to see what they throw at McCarthy, though. And there were times that he didn't have anywhere to go with the ball against Bowling Green, and part of that was Bowling Green's schemes. Credit to them. It's like Scott Loeffler, their head coach, said, we kind of piggyback off them and we copy their schemes. So give them credit for the way they disguise the defenses. I think Greg Schiano is a very good defensive coach, so expect some of that too. But I just think that Michigan's going to have. I think this last game kind of lit a fire under them, and getting Harbaugh back, I expect to see their best game of the year.
I would hope so. I think that sort of alluded to this earlier. It feels like all the ingredients in place now. The main ingredient being Jim Harbaugh, where you would think that this team should come out and have its best performance of the year on Saturday. You look at the front that Rutgers will throw out there. It's a 4-man front. It's either a 4-2-5 or a 4-3. You're going to get a lot of looks that you're used to seeing. No weird fronts, no weird looks. And yeah, they're going to gear up to stop the run, and you're going to have to kind of take whatever they give you. But, when I look at this Michigan offense right now, I think that it was late in last week's game, but that switch they made with the tackles, Ladarius Henderson on the left side, Carson Barnhart flipping over to the right side, I think that's the group that I'm kind of surprised they didn't come out of camp with. Wanted to see what Miles Hinton could do if he could kind of capture that lightning in the bottle from camp. And there's 3 games of film that suggests that won't be the case. So they make the switch. It's not a very big sample size, but Henderson has done extremely well in pass protection. I think he's a more natural fit on that left side than Carson Barnhart is. So, and any deficiencies that Barnhart may have had on that left side, I think will kind of be offset by him being in a more comfortable spot on that right side of the offensive line. So again, I don't know that this is going to be one of those like pick your score games. Rutgers is as deep defensively as they've been. A guy like Aaron Lewis, I think one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the conference. Michigan's going to have its work cut out for them, but I almost feel like last week felt like the wake-up call that I thought was coming this week. So, yeah, I do expect a clean game, and I expect them to be able to take whatever Rutgers gives them and move the ball down the field accordingly.
Kind of like Maryland last year, right, AB, when you came out and you had no competition, and then all of a sudden the level of competition goes up, and they didn't seem to adjust to it until late in that game. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and a turnover early doesn't help either, and that's kind of what Michigan has to avoid. They had a fumble in that game, and you can't make those mistakes if you want to absolutely cruise to victory. But Rutgers so far, not that these numbers mean a ton because of competition around the country, including with Rutgers, but 7th in scoring defense, 20th in total defense, 12th against the run, 57th against the pass, but 12th against the pass in yards per throw. And they've gotten turnovers. They've gotten some interceptions early on this season against some bad teams. But going back to that Temple game, it was 13-0 at halftime. And something, talking to Aaron Breitman, who covers the team over there for the Scarlet Faithful, he was saying the third quarters have been kind of interesting for Rutgers so far, where they have these leads and then they get really conservative, run the football. They have 8 punts on 9 drives in the third quarter so far this season. They let the teams back in, but then they've buried teams in the fourth quarter. So, not sure that script's necessarily super relevant for this game, but I guess it does kind of tell or give a little bit more context to how those games played out. And another thing he was telling me too is they finally have that Big Ten depth. Maybe not the talent of a Michigan or whatever, and not many teams do, but they finally have enough guys that they can rotate in that Greg Schiano's comfortable with, which they haven't had on the defensive side yet since he's come back in 2020. Let's move over to the Michigan defense and talk about what we expect out of a Rutgers offense that has been really terrible under Schiano so far in his tenure, but has shown some improvement this year. Again, early on, you see Gavin Wimsatt. He has improved his completion percentage by 7%, all the way up to a whopping 51.5%. It's still second to last in the Big Ten among qualifying quarterbacks, but the run game has improved. Kyle Managi, reigning Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. He had 143 yards, 3 touchdowns against Virginia Tech, leads the Big Ten with 357 rushing yards, 5'9", 210, averages over 4 yards per rush after contact, which is 8th in the Power 5, 2nd in the Big Ten. They're going to try to run the ball. They are going to snap the ball with 5 seconds to go on the play clock, shorten this game, as you said earlier, Chris. And that's, even with these, teams they've been playing, that's what they've been doing. So it's going to make third downs on both sides of the ball for Michigan, I think, really important. You got to get off the field, get the ball back in the hands of your offense if you're Michigan's defense. And on the flip side, going back to the offense, you got to stay on the field, convert on third downs, because these days with the clock rule, you never know when you're going to get the ball back.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get out to a 2-score lead, in that first quarter, early in the second quarter. And then you're not biting your nails and thinking, man, this is just painful to watch, right? So that to me is key. And tackling, I didn't think they tackled all that well last week against Bowling Green, and that allowed Bowling Green to keep some drives alive that normally they wouldn't have. It's nitpicking when you hold a team to 6 points. And, if you look at what Bowling Green, what nobody accomplished in the non-conference, 173 of their 246 rushing yards against Michigan have come in the fourth quarter when the backups and the third stringers are in there. So nobody's running the ball on them, but I think you're going to see Rutgers try to get a little more creative in the running game, probably run some formations that Michigan hasn't seen before, maybe run Wimsatt a little bit more on designed runs. And it's not going to be one of those games, again, where you can just pin your ears back, as Mike Elston said, and Jesse Minter, Michigan's defensive coaches, and get after the quarterback. You've got to make that pocket collapse on him. And I think that's going to be the key here, is keep him in that pocket and make him make some bad throws, because we know he's got it in him. We've seen it.
Yes.
He's not a great throwing quarterback. So I like Michigan to stop the run here, even without Mason Graham, who will be out this game, as we alluded to earlier in this week, and which is unfortunate. And everybody says, well, we got depth there. People underestimate how good Mason Graham really is in that area. So it'll be up to those other guys to step up. I think they will, and keep those linebackers clean. But got to avoid those third and shorts, because that's where it gets tricky, and that's where these drives go 6-7 minutes, and then you've got yourself a ball game into the second half.
I think we're going to see Rutgers punt the ball a lot in this game.
Good.
And maybe they're playing, maybe it's, field position thing, and they're giving Michigan's offense trouble. But you look at Gavin Wimsatt, for all the discussion, he's much improved, and this is a guy who's just greatly improved his accuracy. Then he's completing 51.5% of his throws. Man, listen, I think that with this Michigan run wall, as they like to call it, with Mason Graham or not, Mason Graham is a big loss, but you have Chris Jenkins, and you have Kenneth Grant, who's been arguably their best defensive tackle at this point in the year. Cam Good has played well. Rayshon Benny has played well. Guys like Braden McGregor, Jalen Harrell play the run extremely well. I just don't see how they're going to be able to get in those short yardage situations unless they do kind of get Wimsatt going with, some of the creative stuff in the run game. And this is a game that's about that run wall and about discipline. You're going to have to stay disciplined, because they're going to try and do some of the designed runs with Wimsatt. They're going to try and, throw Michigan off balance and, hold the ball until the last possible second before they snap it. This is about discipline and tackling, and if nothing else, Greg Schiano teams will force you to play an extremely disciplined, well-conditioned, and focused brand of football against them. And the Michigan defense, outside of a few nitpicks that you alluded to, Chris, I think has been outstanding these first 3 weeks. And maybe they get some reinforcements on the back end this week. We'll see what happens there. But I just don't, Gavin Wimsatt is going to have the game of his life. And we've seen crazy things happen before, but, I just don't see a lot of evidence that he's capable of that in a building with 110,000 screaming people against him. So, yeah, I do expect a clean performance from Michigan's defense, and maybe it's not always pretty, maybe it's a little gritty, but we know that group is capable of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not. I'll add too. Like, it's not just the run wall either. They're going to throw a lot of quick passes, and it goes back to your point, Chris, about tackling. You got to tackle in the open field against these guys. They run some misdirection, that sort of thing. Even though it's a new offensive coordinator, it seems like he's clicked with Wimsatt from what Aaron Breitman was telling me earlier this week. But Gavin Wimsatt, going into the game last year, you didn't really have to worry too much about him running because of his bum ankle a year ago, but already 28 rushes for 144 yards, over double what he had last year. And a lot of them are on design runs, only 5 of his carries for 18 yards on scrambles. So they are going to draw some stuff up for him. And then important to note as well on the Rutgers offensive line, they've got 8 guys that have played 49 or more snaps. They've rotated a lot. The right tackle, Tyler Needham, is out. It's been a revolving door there with 2 guys splitting time. So I know, people are in it's not nothing that, Michigan is having to try to figure out what their best 5 is right now at this point in the year. But I think Rutgers in a much worse spot, not only with its personnel, but with kind of the rotation that they have going on. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about with the Michigan defense is just the potential return of Will Johnson and Rod Moore, and, what kind of impact that could have on this defense. Because I think if those 2 are back and they get going and they're playing how they're capable, teams like Rutgers are going to have an even more tough, time to move the football on this defense. I think you may not need them this week. You may not need them next week, although you'd love to have them on the road. But you want to get these guys going because at some point this defense is going to get tested. But your guys' thoughts on their potential return?
Yeah, we'll have more on that tomorrow and Inside the Fort. But I think, as Jesse Minter said, Michigan's defensive coordinator yesterday, really, really close, really close, so this is not a Nikai Hill-Green situation, guys, where, oh gosh, he tweaked the hammy again or something like that, and he's going to be out for the entire year. Just not happening. So, so again, we'll talk about that more tomorrow, but I expect them to get closer and closer, and for these guys to get healthier and healthier. And once they do, man, it's going to be hard. Think about having a lockdown corner out there as part of a defense that's already been fantastic, and then a safety that's the most instinctual that I've seen at Michigan in the last 40 years in Rod Moore. So excited to see those guys back in action.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those guys, you could make the argument maybe Michigan's 2 best defensive players, ? You could have that conversation. So to have them back, again, I don't know that that's something. If you want to take one more week with them, I think you can get away with it. But, I feel like this is about the time of year, the last 2 seasons, where we've seen this group start to hit its stride and kind of hone in on what his identity is. And going on the road for the first time next weekend, I really feel like that's kind of when you want all troops available if possible. We know Mason Graham is banged up, and we probably won't see him for a couple weeks. But other than that, those 2 guys, and people have asked too, what was the non-conference missing? And it was obviously Jim Harbaugh, but also we haven't seen literally 2 of maybe their 3 best defenders on the field, hardly at all. And in Rod Moore's case, not at all. So this team can get even better and is going to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah. And they still gave up 2-3 long passes, so they've still fared well back there, but I think it could truly take the step to elite, with those guys in there. And it seems like almost the opposite of a Nikai Hill-Green situation, because I feel like they're trying to make sure these guys are 100% before they're back out there, instead of it lingering, because they can't go back out there. Especially maybe in Will Johnson's case, he was working with the ones in warmups last week and then didn't go. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And obviously we'll have the updates over at the Wolverine.com Inside the Fort there